Somebody is about to fall, and Lazarus has already picked the name. Before the credits even finish rolling tonight, one man's entire world starts crumbling in public, and it is not the man you would expect. If you have been waiting for the moment Zondo Tech finally explodes, this is the episode you have been waiting for, so stay with me because there is a lot to unpack. Let's start where the pressure has been building for weeks now. Zondo Tech has been sitting on a powder keg, and everybody watching this show knew that sooner or later somebody inside that company was going to be sacrificed to save face. Tonight, Lazarus finally makes his move, and it is exactly as cold and calculated as we have come to expect from him. He does not walk into this decision emotionally. He walks in like a man doing arithmetic, weighing who is expendable and who is useful, and the person he lands on is Mawethu. Now, if you know anything about how Lazarus operates, you know he never does the dirty work with his own hands directly. He prefers to let suspicion do the talking for him. So instead of a direct accusation, what we get tonight is something far more dangerous, a slow, quiet campaign of doubt planted in exactly the right ears. Whispers here, a raised eyebrow there, a comment that sounds innocent but lands like a blade. By the end of the episode, people who trusted Mawethu completely are suddenly looking at him sideways, and that is the real horror of what Lazarus is doing. He is not just trying to get Mawethu fired or arrested. He is trying to make the people who love Mawethu doubt him too, and that is so much harder to recover from. What makes this whole storyline so painful to watch is that Mawethu has genuinely been trying to hold things together. He has not been the villain of this show. He has been the one quietly absorbing pressure so that everyone around him does not have to. So watching his name get dragged through suspicion feels deeply unfair, and I think that is exactly the point the writers are making. In this world, being decent does not protect you. If anything, it makes you an easier target, because decent people do not expect to be framed. By the middle of the episode, we start seeing the public humiliation angle really take shape. This is not just office gossip anymore. It spills out into spaces where the whole family can see it, and that changes everything. Once something becomes public, it stops being a private disagreement and starts being a reputation problem, and reputation is currency in this family. Once people start talking, the truth almost does not matter anymore, because perception has already taken over. That is the tragedy sitting underneath tonight's episode. Even if Mawethu is completely innocent, and everything points to him being exactly that, the damage from the whispers might already be done before anyone can prove anything. Now let's talk about Lazarus for a second, because I think people underestimate just how dangerous this man has become. He is not reacting to chaos anymore, he is producing it. Every scene he is in tonight, he is 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. He needs a scapegoat, and he needs it to look natural, not forced, and that is the scariest version of a villain, the one who never raises his voice, who never looks rushed, who lets other people do his shouting for him while he sits back looking almost pathetic. If you were hoping tonight would give us a moment where someone finally catches him red-handed, I have to be honest with you, that moment does not come yet. This episode is about the trap closing, not about the trap being discovered. Moving on to another storyline that has been simmering, we finally get real movement between Wandel and the consequences of his own choices. For weeks, Wandel has been circling this idea of revenge, convinced that hurting the people who hurt him would somehow settle the score in his favor. Tonight, we start to see the actual price tag on that decision, and it is steep. Without spoiling every single beat, I will say this: revenge in this show never comes free, and Wandel is about to learn exactly how ruthless the people he is up against can be when they feel cornered. There is a moment tonight where you can see it dawning on his face, that slow realization that he has walked into something bigger than he planned for, and that he may not be able to walk back out of it the same person who walked in. What I appreciate about this arc is that the show does not let Wandel off easy. He is not framed as a tragic hero making one small mistake. He made a choice, he pursued it with his eyes open, and now the consequences are catching up to him in a way that feels earned rather than random. Whether you have sympathy for him or not probably depends on how you feel about revenge as a concept, but either way, tonight's episode makes it very clear that nobody in this family gets to play with fire without eventually getting burned. Now let's shift over to Tamika, because her decision to open up her home tonight creates a ripple effect that nobody in that house was ready for. On the surface, it looks like an act of generosity, maybe even healing, opening a door that has been closed for a long time. But the moment that door opens, old resentments that everybody thought were buried start resurfacing almost immediately. Family members who were forced into proximity start remembering exactly why they kept their distance in the first place. It is one of those classic soap opera moments where a good intention accidentally becomes a spark for a much bigger fire, and I think a lot of viewers are going to be split on whether Tamika made the right call here. There is a particular scene where the tension in the room is almost unbearable, not because anyone is shouting, but because everyone is being painfully polite while clearly furious underneath. That kind of quiet tension is honestly harder to watch than an actual argument, because you know it is only a matter of time before somebody breaks. And a few people do come close to breaking tonight. It does not fully boil over in this episode, but the seeds, no pun intended, are very clearly planted for something bigger down the line. Let's talk about Mawethu for a moment, because her pregnancy has quickly become one of the most emotionally loaded storylines on the show right now. Tonight, a disagreement over how to handle the pregnancy exposes wounds that go far deeper than anyone was expecting. This is not just about a baby. It is about old insecurities, old promises that were never kept, and questions of loyalty that this family has been avoiding for a long time. When Mawethu speaks up tonight, she is not just defending her own choices, she is essentially forcing everyone around her to confront things they would rather ignore. It is a strong, emotional performance, and I think it is going to resonate with a lot of viewers who have their own complicated family histories. What struck me watching this scene is how the show uses Mawethu's pregnancy almost as a mirror for the rest of the family. New life is coming into a household that is still carrying so much unresolved pain, and the contrast between hope for the future and grief over the past is handled really delicately here. It is not heavy-handed. It does not spell everything out for you. It trusts the audience to sit with the discomfort, and I think that restraint pays off. Now here is where things get really interesting, because Zolani steps into a role tonight that nobody saw coming this early. With everything falling apart around him, Zolani makes the decision to step up in a way that quietly reshapes the emotional center of the family. Without giving away every detail, I will say that his willingness to take on responsibility for someone else's child speaks volumes about how much he has grown as a character. A few seasons ago, this would have felt completely out of character for him. Tonight, it feels earned, and honestly, kind of moving. Of course, not everyone is thrilled about this. Thandika's reaction is complicated, and understandably so. There is a version of this decision that reads as pure kindness, and there is a version that reads as Zolani inserting himself into a situation that is not fully his to control, and the show smartly lets both interpretations exist in the same scene without picking a side for you. I think that ambiguity is one of the strongest choices in tonight's episode. It respects the audience enough to let us sit with mixed feelings instead of telling us exactly how to feel. Let's also touch on Azanda for a second, because his celebrations tonight provide one of the few genuinely warm moments in an otherwise tense episode. After everything this family has been through, watching a moment of real joy and community pride feels almost necessary, like the show knows the audience needs a breath of relief before diving back into the chaos. But even here, the writers cannot resist planting a shadow. Right as Azanda's celebration reaches its peak, we get that gut punch reminder that somewhere else in this family, someone else's world is quietly falling apart at the exact same time. That juxtaposition, joy on one side of the screen, devastation on the other, is honestly one of the more effective storytelling choices in the whole episode. It reminds you that in this world, celebration and heartbreak often happen in the very same breath. Now, stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, what tonight's episode really does is set the board for a much larger confrontation coming down the line. Lazarus is not going to stop with quiet whispers. Once suspicion around Mawethu builds enough momentum, you can bet Lazarus intends to use it publicly, probably at the worst possible moment, probably in front of the people whose opinion matters most to Mawethu. That is how this character has operated the entire time, and I do not see any reason to think tonight is where he suddenly changes strategy. For Mawethu specifically, I think the real question going forward is not whether he can prove his innocence eventually, because in a show like this, the truth almost always comes out in the end. The real question is how much damage gets done before that truth surfaces, and whether the relationship strained by this fake suspicion can actually recover once the dust settles. Trust, once cracked, does not always snap back into place just because the facts get corrected. That is the emotional stakes I will be watching closely in the coming episodes. As for Wandel, I am genuinely curious to see whether he tries to salvage the situation he has created, or whether pride keeps him from admitting how badly he has misjudged things. Characters in this show rarely change course easily, and Wandel in particular has a track record of doubling down rather than stepping back. If that pattern holds, things are only going to get messier from here. Tamika's decision to open her home is going to have consequences that outlast tonight's episode by a long stretch. Once family tension gets reignited like this, it really stays contained to one evening. I expect we are going to see fallout from this decision play out over multiple episodes, especially as more buried resentments come to the surface. And then there is the question everyone watching is probably asking by now: will anyone in this family actually catch Lazarus before he manages to pull off framing Mawethu completely? Right now, the momentum is entirely in his favor. Nobody suspects him yet, at least not enough to act on it, and that is exactly how he wants it. But shows like this love a slow-burning reveal, and I would not be shocked if a small crack in his plan starts showing sooner rather than later. Before I wrap up, I want to highlight just how strong the performances were tonight, particularly in the scenes involving suspicion and betrayal. The quieter, more restrained moments landed harder than any shouting match could have, and that says a lot about how far the writing and acting on this show have come. Soap operas sometimes get a reputation for being over the top, but tonight's episode leaned into subtlety in a way that genuinely elevated the material. So here is where things stand heading into the next episode. Mawethu's reputation is hanging by a thread. Wandel is starting to feel the weight of a decision he cannot undo. Tamika has reopened a door that might be impossible to fully close again. Zethu has forced her family to confront truths they have been avoiding, and Zoloni has quietly repositioned himself as someone far more important to this family's future than anyone expected. Every single one of these threads is pulling tighter, and it feels like something in this family is going to snap very soon. That is my full breakdown of tonight's episode. Let me know down in the comments who you think is going to expose Lazarus first, and whether you think Mawethu can survive this before the damage becomes permanent. If you enjoyed this recap, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you do not miss the next review, because based on where tonight left off, the next episode is going to be a big one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.